Hello everyone, I'm so glad to see you back on my channel. Today, we step into a new chapter in the story of love entangled with conspiracy, betrayal, and redemption between CEO James and LT Dype. A journey that is not only a battle for survival but also a struggle between reason and emotion, loyalty and the deeply human urge to resist. In the previous episode, we witnessed a major turning point, the moment when the boundaries between right and wrong began to blur more than ever before. John and Trang's father, the men operating behind the shadows, had assigned her the role of an insider. With her obedient facade and flawless cover, Trang was expected to approach James and Dype with ease, then deliver a quiet yet devastating blow. It all seemed to be going according to plan until they forgot one thing: that even in the most lost of souls, a flicker of light still remains. And it was that very light that awakened Trang at the last moment, amid confusion and torment. She chose not to betray her conscience again. She could no longer turn a blind eye knowing Dype was in imminent danger. Nor could she continue lying to James, the man who had once treated her with genuine trust and kindness. Trang arranged to meet James at the workshop, a place that seemed like an ordinary business rendezvous, to secretly warn him. She advised him to be cautious about the upcoming shipment of timber, as it might be a trap, and urged him to keep Dype away from the public eye during this sensitive time. However, even the smallest change can trigger an uncontrollable ripple, and this time, the wave surged more violently than ever before. Trang's father, sharp and experienced from his years in the criminal underworld, soon noticed a shift in his daughter's behavior. Upon discovering that Trang had secretly approached and warned James, he was furious. His disappointment turned into hostility, and when the betrayal was exposed, he didn't hesitate to inform John, who, like a wounded beast, went into a frenzy. John wasted no time. He ordered the plan to move forward immediately. No more stalling. No more watching. He decided to strike that very night. Dype was to be eliminated first, but James was not someone to be easily outmaneuvered. He had already begun to suspect something, and this time he wouldn't stay passive. He quickly contacted the special task force that had been secretly tracking John for some time. A pursuit was now underway, quiet but precise, relentless yet calculated. From this point on, it would no longer be a simple story between three individuals. This was now a game between light and darkness, between justice and crime, and more importantly, between people torn by family ties, loyalty, and a long overdue awakening. How will Trang confront the father she once idolized, the very man who led her into the shadows? Can James protect Dype from John's cold-blooded plot? And will justice arrive in time before everything spirals beyond redemption? The answers await in today's video. Don't take your eyes off the screen, because the next few minutes will be a breathless race where life and death may hinge on a single choice. It seemed that after Trang secretly met with CEO James to warn him, everything would quietly pass. But reality proved to be the exact opposite. Trang's father, Mr. was not someone easily deceived. With hardened instincts and a ruthlessness forged through years of navigating the underworld, he quickly sensed a shift in his daughter's behavior, and when he discovered that it was Trang who had secretly warned James about the timber shipment and John's plan, his fury erupted like a wildfire beyond control. Mr. immediately reached out to James to confirm the betrayal. But what enraged him most wasn't the compromised plan, it was that his own daughter, the one he had once placed so much hope in, had now taken the side of the very man he sought to destroy. Not letting things spiral further, he summoned Trang to face him. In the cold, dimly lit room, with only the sound of wind whistling through the half-open window and a faint yellow light overhead, he interrogated her relentlessly. There was no trace of affection left in his voice. Each word struck like a blade, tearing through the last remnants of hope Trang still held in her heart. He called her a fool, a traitor, a failed pawn in the game he had committed everything to win. But this time, Trang was no longer the obedient daughter who bowed her head and followed orders. She didn't cry, nor did she lash out. She simply stood there calm, composed but with tear-filled eyes, and a resolute gaze, as though something deep inside her had finally awakened. She looked at her father and spoke slowly. Ever since I was a child, you taught me to live with integrity, to know right from wrong, to be a good person. I've always held on to that. But today, you're asking me to turn my back on everything you once taught me, to become a villain, to bring harm to innocent people, all because of old grudges. You call me a traitor. But have you ever asked yourself who's really betraying what they once believed in? She paused, then continued, Dad, from the beginning, James and Dipe have done nothing wrong. We are all people wounded by the past. But if we let hatred lead the way, how many more will suffer because of it? I don't want to walk any further down this dark path. And I don't want to watch you fall deeper into it either. Please stop. The room fell silent. But it wasn't a silence of understanding, it was the calm before the storm. Merton didn't listen. On the contrary, his rage only intensified. He shouted, cursed her harshly, claiming she had been brainwashed by emotion and blind compassion. In his fury, he ordered that Trang be locked up, not because he feared she'd run away, but because he knew, if she continued acting, she would ruin everything. She was no longer an ally. From that moment on, she was an obstacle. The door slammed shut. The sound of the lock echoed coldly. As for John, the mastermind behind a series of dark conspiracies, when he learned of Trang's betrayal, his expression changed instantly. His cold eyes revealed a burning fury. John had never truly trusted anyone but himself. However, he had once made an exception for Trang because she was Mr. Daughter, a crucial piece in the carefully crafted plan he had spent so long constructing. But now, that very piece had fractured. And to John, betrayal was an unforgivable crime. In a fit of rage, he smashed the tea table and yanked the curtains open, flooding the room with dim, pale light. The subordinates nearby lowered their heads, barely daring to breathe. John roared, his voice dry yet razor-sharp. Trang has chosen to side with James, then she must not blame me for being ruthless. There was no longer any reason to delay. John immediately accelerated the entire operation. Originally, his plan was to wait a few more days to finish planting forged evidence and craft a perfect setup to bring down CEO James, but now he had no need for pretense. He wanted to end it all swiftly, brutally, and without a way back. Target number 1, James, the man who was gradually disrupting his grip on power. Target number 2, Dipe, the woman James fiercely protected. And the most devastating psychological blow John could deliver, he ordered his forces to split into 2 teams. One team was assigned to monitor and ambush James at the lumber yard, his usual haunt in recent days. The other team was instructed to secretly infiltrate the area where Dipe was staying, with the goal of abducting her immediately. On James's side, the moment he received Trang's sincere warning, he immediately realized how dangerously urgent the situation had become. He understood that nothing was within the safe zone anymore, and if he hesitated for even a moment, Dipe could become the victim of a ruthless scheme. Without delay, James contacted the Special Police Task Force, who had long been secretly investigating John's illegal activities. With James's cooperation, the authorities began to accelerate their investigations and broaden their scope. Over the past few days, undercover officers had been following every trail and secret network linked to John. At last, they uncovered highly critical evidence, a series of illegal logging and timber trafficking operations orchestrated by John, all disguised through shell companies. But that wasn't the end. A new breakthrough suddenly emerged. A group of John's close associates was discovered using narcotics inside an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city. That very night, the police stormed in, arresting the entire group and seizing drugs, phones, documents, and communication devices connected to John's organization. Once brought in for questioning, under the weight of interrogation and overwhelming evidence, the gang began to panic. It didn't take long before they confessed the entire plot down to the detail, that Dipe was to be kidnapped in order to pressure James. According to their statements, John's goal was to capture Dipe and force James to hand over full control of the company. Additionally, he aimed to seize a substantial portion of assets currently in James's possession as an act of revenge and a way to regain his weakening power with this critical information. The entire course of the case shifted. The police immediately submitted an emergency request for protection of both James and Dipe. A swift action plan was activated. A special protection unit was dispatched to guard James around the clock, while another team was sent to Dipe's location to ensure her absolute safety. At the same time, a warrant for John's arrest was officially approved. A major operation was now underway. John was no longer just a shadowy suspect. He had become a top priority target, who must be captured before causing further harm to anyone else. However, all of James and the police's efforts were one step too late. John, perhaps sensing the looming threat, didn't hesitate for even a second. He ordered a group of his most loyal men to head straight to the home of Dipe's aunt and uncle, where she had been staying to rest. This time, unlike before, they acted more recklessly and aggressively than ever. There was no more pretense, no more disguises or cautious glances. Instead, the group stormed directly into the yard, boldly surrounding the house with threatening shouts. One of them stepped forward, pointed directly at Dipe's aunt, and growled in a deep, icy voice, "Hand over the girl named Dipe now, or don't blame us for what happens next." Dipe's aunt froze, her face drained of all color and sheer terror. But just a heartbeat later, she managed to regain a sliver of composure. Her trembling hands reached for the cleaver on the cutting board in the side kitchen, and she stepped onto the porch, gripping the handle tightly, her eyes blazing with fierce defiance. "You're not laying a hand on my niece. If you want to come and step over my dead body first." Her voice shook, but it wasn't weak. It was the voice of a rural woman unaccustomed to violence, but ready to fight for family. The thugs hesitated for a moment. None of them expected an elderly woman to actually threaten them with a knife. But within seconds, one of them sneered, "What is this, a movie scene or something?" He gave a signal. Another man lunged forward, lightning fast, and kicked the knife out of her hand. The clatter of metal echoed across the cement floor. Dipe's aunt was shoved to the ground. Before she could get up, two of them grabbed her arms, covered her mouth, and dragged her into the house. They were done waiting. At that very moment, Dipe returned from a distance, a basket of herbal medicine in her hand. As she passed through the gate, her heart stopped at the sight in front of her. Her aunt was being restrained by two strangers, her eyes filled with fear and helplessness. Dipe froze. But before she could react, one of the men shouted, "There she is. That's the girl." Survival instincts kicked in. Without a second thought, Dipe turned and ran. The men immediately gave chase, cursing as they sprinted after her. She darted into the narrow trail leading to the forest behind the house, a place she knew well from her herbal foraging trips. Thanks to her familiarity with the terrain, Dipe weaved through hidden paths, thick bushes, and slippery slopes, causing the pursuers to stumble repeatedly on unfamiliar ground. But luck didn't hold for long. While trying to grip a large rock to cross a shallow stream, Dipe's foot slipped on the damp edge. Her body tumbled down the slope. A harsh thud echoed. She had twisted her ankle. A sharp, stabbing pain surged through her leg, forcing her to grit her teeth. Dipe tried to stand, limping forward, but every step felt like a dagger cutting through her muscles. The rustling of leaves behind her grew louder. Voices echoed through the forest. "Where do you think you're going? I can see her shadow." Her breathing became rapid. Her heart pounded like a drum inside her chest. She didn't dare look back. Every step now felt like her body was tearing apart. yet she kept pushing forward toward the narrow path leading to the other side of the forest, where there might be locals or help. But the footsteps behind her were now dangerously close. So close, she could feel their breath on the back of her neck. Elsewhere, James was also not spared from the danger closing in. After Trang's warning, he had heightened his awareness, but he hadn't expected John's men to strike so fast and so recklessly. A group of 3 suddenly ambushed him just as he was leaving the lumber yard to meet with the police. They acted with brutal efficiency, saying nothing as they charged at him with a single goal: to take him down, immobilize him, and possibly eliminate him. But they had underestimated him. James, who had lived and trained for years in Europe, not only possessed superior physical strength, but also had professional self-defense skills. Without hesitation, he fought back, using every opening to take control. Within minutes of intense grappling, 2 of them were down, and before the last one could react, James had already brought him to the ground. At that very moment, the police arrived. Having been tipped off by the undercover unit, the Special Task Force had been trailing James to ensure his safety. Seeing the situation, they quickly subdued the attackers, documented the scene, and took the men into custody. One officer approached James, placing a hand on his shoulder, and said urgently, "We'll secure things here. You need to get to Miss Dipe immediately. There's a high chance she's in danger." James's heart sank. Without another word, he bolted into his car and raced toward the house of Dipe's aunt and uncle. Only one thought consumed him: would he make it in time? When he arrived, the sight before him sent chills down his spine. The door was flung open. The interior was in disarray, clear signs of a struggle. Dipe's aunt was on the ground, pale and gasping for air. The moment she saw James, she broke down in panic. "They came, they grabbed me, they were after Dipe. She ran into the forest, they're chasing her." There was no time to lose. James sprinted down the narrow trail leading into the forest, the same path Dipe often took. When gathering herbs, his figure disappeared behind a wall of bamboo, leaving only the sound of pounding footsteps and ragged breaths echoing through the tension-choked air. He ran wildly, his heart pounding in his chest. Eyes locked on every faint footprint along the forest floor, each bent blade of grass, each broken twig was a clue, and in his mind, there was only one thing left: he had to find Dipe, no matter what. While dashing down a slippery slope, moving too fast, James suddenly tripped over a thick root sprawled across the path. His body slammed into the ground, his knees and elbows scraping against jagged rocks. A searing pain shot through him, blood beginning to seep from torn skin on his arm and knee. He collapsed, gasping, his whole body aching. But James didn't allow himself to stop. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to rise, shaking from the pain that slashed through him like knives. "Come on, Dipe needs me," he whispered, a desperate vow to himself, limping. Dragging each heavy step, James pushed forward. Every stride was agony, but his will remained unshaken. He followed the rustling sounds in the bushes, the subtle movement of leaves, the faintest breath caught in the wind, as if hearing Dipe's distant voice calling to him from deep within the forest. Then a faint sound emerged from behind a thicket, a gasp, a branch snapping. James's heart nearly stopped. He held his breath, stepping forward slowly, his entire body tense like a drawn bowstring, because he knew if he was one step too late, he might lose her forever. So, will James make it in time to save Dipe from the ruthless hands of her pursuers? Will his love, courage, and determination be strong enough to weather this storm? And what about the police now that they have all the evidence in hand? Will they be able to stop John's sinister plan in time? Will the villains be brought to light and finally pay the price for all the crimes they've committed? Everything remains a mystery for now. A single second could change the course of destiny. A single moment could determine the survival of 2 souls fighting for love and justice. Let us all pray that James and Dipe return safely together and unharmed. If you're as anxious and hopeful as we are, leave a comment below to send them strength and encouragement. Don't forget to like, share, And subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episode where every secret will be revealed. And the life and death showdown between light and darkness reaches its climax. See you in the next episode where everything will finally come to light.
Hello, xin chào tất cả mọi người. Mọi người ơi, thì hôm nay tập của Lý Tử Diệp và CEO James diễn ra một cách rất là kịch tính, đúng không mọi người? Mọi người cũng có thể thấy là James và Diệp thì cả hai đều đang gặp rất là nguy hiểm. Diệp thì đang chạy trốn ở trong rừng và khả năng bị bắt lại là cũng rất là cao. Nhưng mà liệu James có tới kịp thời để cứu cô khỏi nguy hiểm hay không? Và cảnh sát do Tùng dẫn đến có kịp thời để cứu họ hay không? Và tên John sẽ làm như thế nào để bắt Diệp cũng như là đe dọa James, thì mọi người hãy đón xem vào tập tiếp theo ở ngày mai mọi người nhé. Và mọi người ơi, để cho James và Diệp được an toàn vượt qua khó khăn hiện tại thì mọi người hãy để lại bình luận để động lực, rồi là tạo động lực cho James và Diệp để vượt qua mọi người nhé. Và hãy nhớ là hãy đăng ký kênh, sau đó bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ tập nào, cũng như là đón xem tập tiếp theo một cách sớm nhất có thể. Và xin chào tạm biệt, hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo.